Cowboy Romance, Running Wild with the Alpha Bear. Written by Cynthia Mendoza. Narrated by Rebecca Wolfe. Jen wasn't the kind of person to get scared, but things were looking grim. For years, she'd been on the run, and for years, she'd stuck it out. Never faltering in her belief that she'd eventually shake the men trailing her. But it just wasn't that easy. The FBI had ended up posing a considerably tougher challenge to shake than she'd originally thought. Thinking that the stories of their detective prowess had to be at least part propaganda intended to scare the public into obeying the government. Now it seemed like so long ago when the bank heist she'd been part of went wrong. She tried not to think about it, but it was hard not to when she kept having nightmares that plagued her sleep. When she did think about it, all she could think about were the friends she lost, Kim and Dave, and how they had had the highest hopes that nothing would go wrong. In Jen's dreams, it all played back to her on a slow-motion loop. Dave slipping the note across the counter to the teller, Tim standing up on a table and waving around a toy gun that she'd spray-painted black to look real. For a few minutes, everything went as planned, but then the security guard walked out of the bathroom. They didn't see him coming. Not being professionals, they had never thought that there might be armed guards on the premises, or that one might be taking a leak when they made their move. In hindsight, she realized they should have all sat down together with a banker and pretended to open accounts and take out loans. That would have really given them time to really drink in the interior of the bank. But that wasn't how it had happened. So Dave took a bullet to the chest, and Kim, well, to her shame, Jen hadn't stuck around to find out. When Dave went down, the police sirens were already wailing in the distance. Jen had known she had to make her move quickly, and there was nothing she could do for Dave. And Kim, well, the last she'd seen of her, she had her hair balled in a knot and was being held by a teller. After the fact, as Jen realized, she would probably have to leave town, as both of her former partners' cell phones had texts of their poorly laid plans. It hit her that her life would never be the same. That was something they didn't go over in the movies. In the movies, people ran or stayed put, and whatever happened, they didn't cry or get depressed. In the movies, the bank robbers that got away always seemed to be one step ahead of the law, or at least able to move on and start another life. And before 9/11, maybe that might have been the case, but now everything was so closely watched and tallied and recorded. There had been no way for her to skirt the fact that she was now a very wanted criminal. It amazed her that she hadn't thought about the consequences before they impacted her life, making her wonder what in the hell they'd all been thinking when they decided it was a good idea to knock off a bank. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that it had been Dave that had come up with the entire poorly laid plan. He was also the one with the crushing debt of his movie rental business going under. If it hadn't been for Dave's prodding and insistence that they go through with it, she knew Kim would have eventually blanched at the idea. Because it had all started out as simple bullshitting, just some friends sitting around an open fire in Jen's backyard. Well, at least it had been bullshitting to her and Kim. Dave had always gotten a sick gleam in his eyes whenever they talked about how they were going to make some easy money, just sliding a note to a teller. It had all seemed so easy sitting around the campfire. Like it would almost be like finding money more than actually stealing money. The banks were all federally insured anyway, so no one was really going to get hurt. Or, at least, no one was supposed to get hurt. But that part of the plan fell through nearly instantly. And no matter how much Jen wished herself back to the quiet nights before they'd even had the notion that they could get away with something like stealing from people with guns and the law being on their side, Dave had made it all seem so easy, though. Dave had been the one to write the note when Kim's hands had started to tremble the morning of. Jen wondered why she hadn't done something to stop it. Why she'd participated knowing that it wasn't a good idea. Had Dave really crawled so far into her ear with his smooth voice that he touched her mind and persuaded her that he knew best? She supposed that he had. And now she'd been running from that decision for longer than she cared to remember. She was never allowed to stay in any place for more than a few months. Eventually, some act of the universe would tip off the authorities that she was trying to settle down somewhere. And that was all, and that was what they were really against. The feds knew that someone could run forever, maybe even past the ends of the earth. But they also knew how hard it
Sample complete. Ready to continue?